and it's time to change again into English. So for me, it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Derek Oliver, who has come, more than 30 years of experience talking about and learning, teaching about security, control, government, and very involved with ISACA headquarters, a lot of travels to Chicago, and in these last days or last time has been working very close with people in the COVID-5 task force. So anything else, Derek, it's your time.
Switch me on. Oh, I'm on. Right. So, hola. Buenos días. All I can say in Spanish is una cerveza, por favor. I'm sorry, the rest must be in English. So, push a button, Derek, and see what happens. Well, there we are. I'm not going to go through all that rubbish because you can read all that about me. Interesting thing as far as this presentation is concerned is that I currently chair the task force that's developing Cobit 5, so I suppose I do know a bit about Cobit. Now, when I was particularly asked to come and speak on this subject, so I thought I'd better get on to ISACA and find out exactly what they wanted me to say, because what is the future going to be? It's no good talking about the past. We want to say what's coming. And they sent me a nice pack of slides that would probably do us for a full-day workshop, which I've managed to cut down to about an hour and a half, and I now have about 40 minutes. So I will be even quicker than the last English speaker, but very appropriate because he was talking about processes. I'm talking about the future of process measurement. So the objectives for this session are the new program that we've brought out, because for years we've looked at maturity modeling and now we're trying to change everything. Understanding of why we've chosen to go with this ISO standard 15504. We'll maybe see how time goes, but perhaps we'll walk through just one of the processes, and I do want to find time to have a look at Cobit 5. You've all had a chance to see it if you're that interested, because it's a free download, mainly for you to comment on at the moment, but we'll talk about that when we get there. We've developed, using Cobit 4.1, that's the current version, a PAM, a process assessment model, downloadable for free on the ISACA website. There is going to be an assessor guide and a self-assessment toolkit, which will probably be out in the next month. I think we are that far advanced on that. Obviously, the idea is that ISACA is looking to the future. I have to admit, when we started developing Cobit 5 and they said, oh, we're dropping maturity modeling, I was very opposed because I like maturity modeling. I've used maturity modeling as an auditor and in security assessments for many years, and a lot of people who've implemented Cobit, like CMM. And now I have to talk about what I considered to be the opposition. I have to say I'm convinced this is the way forward. We looked at the ISO standard and we said, well, people will want to follow an ISO standard. So ISACA decided, well, we're going to move to process measurement. So we adapt the existing 4.1 content into this new 15504 model. And Cobit 5, as I said, is very much built on the new model. Yes, we already have maturity modeling. The point about 15504 and process assessment is it's far more granular, more detailed. We can be a lot more robust in the way we assess our product. We're looking at processes at a much deeper level. For that reason, if any of you have performed maturity modeling and now use this new model, you will find you come out with a lower score. That's not such a bad thing. I'm having to do a similar concept where I currently work in the British Health Service, where we have to do an assessment of our capability. And I've just started work on the new baseline for the next year, and I'm having to tell my management we've gone from a level 2, which is very good and very acceptable, to a level 0, which means we don't do anything. Now that's a nice shock for them, so I don't think it does a bad service to management now and again to remind them that things change. And this is one of them. We do get a more robust, a more objective assessment of how our processes work. But as I say, it will probably vary. Basically, we have two concepts that I'll mention to you today. As I say, we won't have a lot of time to go into them in detail, but we have the PAM, the model, and we have a process. This is the model, a process reference model, which contains the information we need to assess, how are we going to measure it, and how those two come together into the single model which we've produced. We'll then talk about the process itself and go briefly into how we plan the project to conduct the assessment. Starting out with the model itself, this is what it looks like, only of course, because now it has been completed and is available to you, it doesn't have the word draft on it. I was told to remove that, but I couldn't be bothered, because all the information is here. First of all, we have the purpose. Why are we bothering to run this process? It's the high-level, hopefully measurable objectives. Why are we performing the process? To go back to what David said earlier, perhaps not just the objective, but the outcome we want to achieve from that objective. I think that was a very important concept. The outcomes themselves are the result. So we need to achieve something, but what do we really want to achieve for the business? It could be an object, it could be a change of state, it could be meeting targets. What is our base practice? What activities that when we're performing them contribute to achieving the purpose? So what are we actually doing in this process that is going to help us achieve our objective? Down the bottom we have the inputs and the outputs. These are the objects associated with them. What are we, if you like, I believe it was mentioned earlier, the raw materials in the manufacturing process. Where are we starting? And what are we ending up with? Where do they go? It links straight back to Cobit. Does that come out well? Just about. This is Cobit 4.1. Those of you familiar with it, that's what it looks like. And you'll find that the outcomes there come straight from the objectives, as do the outcomes there come from the, I've picked deliver and support. That's just one of our 34 objectives. In there, we've also got the practices, because that's how Cobit breaks them down, and the inputs and outputs, the sources, and the targets for what we're trying to produce. So that's looked at that. Now we'll look at the measurement, how we go about measuring this process. We measure the extent to which the process achieves the specific attributes. We call them the process attributes. The way we've broken it down, 9 particular attributes based on the ISO standard. I'm going to break down a couple of these. I won't go through them all. That is where the whole day's workshop comes in. So this is just the first few. But basically, we start out looking at the performance of the process, how well it's actually working. Are we actually managing that performance to produce something, the work product? Is it well defined? Is it deployed? So is it, from an auditor's perspective, I want to see it in writing, I want to see people trained, I want to have documentation available to help people if things go wrong. Can we measure it? There's an old saying from quality management, if you can't measure, you can't improve. I'm very keen on quality management and sayings like that, because I think it's important. Are we in control of it? Are we so good at it that we can change it? We can see when it's defective and we can improve it. So we've got continuous optimization. Just taking the first one, a measure of the extent to which we're achieving the purpose, and the result of this full achievement is we've actually got defined outcomes. We know what our targets are and we are regularly achieving them. So, we have to ask, what is the purpose of the process? What is this for? What are we trying to do with this process? Is that actually what it does? Standard audit questions, any of you with an audit background like myself, we're saying, well, what are we trying to achieve, and is that what it does achieve? Do we achieve the outcomes? Are we able to measure the fact that we're producing something that is good for the business, not just an object, but something the business needs and can use? Looking at another one, performance management. Do we understand what the objectives are? Have we formally and clearly identified them in some form of documentation? We plan it, we monitor it, we measure it, we know how well we are achieving. We know what our target is, so we know when we've achieved it or how far short of it we are. Have we got responsibility assigned? Do we know who looks after it, what their responsibilities are? In security terms, I often talk about the data owner. Well, data ownership implies responsibility. Do the people who are responsible know they're responsible, and do they know what it means? That's where these things tend to fall down in my experience. We say you're responsible and somebody sort of nods and says, yeah, sure, and then they go away and forget it because they don't really understand the implication of that responsibility. So we need to check that people have been told, people understand, perhaps it needs training. We've got the resources that are necessary. If we're going to say we are achieving performance management, have we got the resources we need to do that? People are a resource, training is a resource, obviously technology is a resource. And are people talking to each other? Are there interfaces between the parties? Because if we don't communicate, things won't work. Another quick look, one of the attributes of work product management, the extent to which our products are appropriately managed. Full achievement means that we know what we're trying to produce and we're producing it. It is documented. We've defined what the process is and what the steps within the process are. We know exactly what we're producing. That's documented, it's controlled, and it's reviewed. A manager's job is not just to manage the day-to-day running, but to make sure it's not just achieving today, but it will achieve tomorrow and next week and next month and next year. We rate things according to a scale. So N, not achieved. In other words, little or no evidence that we're actually doing anything, perhaps 0 to 15%. Partially, well, we've got some evidence. It's working, but we don't really know why. But let's not shake things up. It ain't broke, don't fix it. Largely, probably most organisations will go for this level. We're not spending too much. We're achieving, we know why we're achieving pretty well. There's a systematic approach. So we are being able to repeat on a regular basis a good achievement, success rate. Some weaknesses, but maybe we can live with them. I would say most businesses are going to be about there as a target, because when we go to fully achieved, 85 to 100%, that's where we start spending money. Now, obviously, if the process is vital to the business, then we've got to be at that level. But that is obviously a business decision. Evidence of a complete and systematic approach to and full achievement of the attribute. Now, we can do that for all of the attributes in that last slide. How we take this forward? Well, level 0, an incomplete process. In other words, we don't have anything. Level 1 will be related to the performance. And if we're going to say we're achieving that, then the process is implemented and achieves exactly what we intend it to. We go to level 2, a managed process, by saying that the process is managed. We understand the work products, we know what we're trying to do, and we're pretty good at getting there. Level 3, it's established. A defined process is used based on standard processes. So we know exactly, having documented what we're trying to achieve. Everybody knows it. People are trained. People are experienced. Our managers are managing. It's predictable, up to level 4, it's consistent. We can say that it worked yesterday, it will work tomorrow. And we're measuring that to make sure of it. Optimized, as I said, at level 5, well, that's where we're really talking about saying, well, are we reactive or are we proactive? Are we just going to fix things when they happen, when management, when executive, that was the example earlier, we don't make something anymore? Are we reacting or are we being properly informed when management wants to change something so that we can be prepared for it? We can be innovative, we can optimize our process. There are differences to the old maturity model. This, I suppose, is the sales pitch, as far as ISACA is concerned, to say why people should change from maturity modelling to the new method. The words are similar. You see, in maturity modelling, we talk about non-existent process, we talk about incomplete, initial, performed, repeatable, managed, defined, established, and so on. Optimised and optimising. Why we had to change the odd word is down to ISO. But it does mean the levels are not quite the same. So it's quite likely, if you do use this particular method, the PAM method, process assessment, you're not going to come up with the same level. And the reason I think it's important, the thing that sold me, is because it is so much more granular, so much more detailed. With maturity modelling, sometimes it's that sort of approach to see which way the wind is blowing and it looks right, so let's give it a tick. With process assessment, it's a lot more detailed. So that was the reference model itself and the measurement. Now let's look at how we start assessing by looking at an example. We'll walk through just one element from Cobit. That's what it looks like. As you see, the purpose to satisfy the business requirement of ensuring the alignment of key IT services with the business needs. Does the process achieve its outcome? Are we actually doing what the business wants us to? Now, I think it was a very important statement made in the first session today that the object is not the outcome. The object may be something we're producing, but if it's not what the business wants, it's useless. So we do need to look beyond that and say, is there a significant change of state? Perhaps we're talking about the manufacturing process and going from raw material to something we can sell. But certainly within IT, we will be talking about establishing what is the business need and meeting it. Not just saying, well, many, many, many years ago, back in the 1970s, I was a systems analyst, and my approach was to work out what I wanted the users to have, model it, and sell it to them. That's not what we should be doing. We should be finding out what the business needs and providing it, not finding out what it's easy for me to give them and then saying, hey, I can do this for you. And again, we can look at this and we can say, are we not achieving it partially, largely, or fully? We can do that for each one of our defined capability measures. Looking at the next one, performance management, have we identified what the objectives are? Is it planned? Is it monitored? Are we adjusting? Is this where the emerging issues come in to the project that was mentioned earlier? Can we cope with those, or are we just going to carry on regardless? Are we capable of changing things as we go? And are we getting the right information? Are we communicating? One of my the courses that I present in implementing IT governance, using ITIL strangely enough, I make it clear that one of the benefits I find in ITIL is the number of opportunities it gives IT to talk to the business, from setting up service levels right through to capacity planning, everything. We can't do it in IT without the business input. We therefore have to talk the same language as business, and I think that's one of the most important aspects of governance, is this ability to communicate. And that's important here in performance. If we are going to give the business what it needs, then we must understand what are the needs of the business. So we must be talking to people. So I've given a little tick here to say we've largely achieved it, because I think that's where I'd like most people to be. I think if it was fully achieved, we'd be talking about a very IT literate board of directors, and I don't tend to come across those very often, rather particularly where I work at the moment, but let's not talk about the British Health Service. So, work product. We're assessing how well we're doing. Have we actually defined and documented exactly what we're trying to achieve? Are we in control of them? Are we measuring our process? Basically, we can then take all of these and put them onto a chart. So here's the initial measurement. We can say for each one of our attributes, process performance, management, work product, and so on, deployment, definition, measurement, we can tick a box. Now, we've done that with a proper assessment, not just a quick look. Now we can talk about how we can assess the information. The process assessment. Pretty obvious, like any project, we must start with an initiation, we must plan it, we must get the team together and brief them, we collect data, validate it, we look at the attributes and we rate them, and then we report. Not much different to any other process, really. We need to find out who the sponsor is. Hopefully that's pretty obvious, but who's driving it? What do they want us to do? Do we understand that? Do we know why we're doing the job? Are we doing it because we're ticking a box? In many industries, that is the case. We're doing it. There's an old joke in audit that says, why did the auditor cross the road? And the answer is because, according to the audit documentation, that's what they did last year. Unfortunately, that's still true in some auditors, but it shouldn't be. And just like this process, we start out by saying, are we doing this because the book says, or are we doing it because we need to? So what's the scope? What are we going to look at? Who do we need to talk to? Obviously, we're setting a timescale on this, so we need to say what are the constraints. People's availability could be a constraint. Do we want to go talking to the finance department at the end of the tax year? You won't be very welcome. Any additional information we might need to get elsewhere. Perhaps there are legal implications, so we need to get hold of the relevant laws. We need to build our team. We need to then sort of make sure the sponsor likes the team. That is quite important because they have got to go and talk to them. Planning, obviously we need to get the plan together. We build into the scope. We make sure we've got the resources, IT and people, and time. And we get a methodology together, coordinating the assessment activities within the unit being assessed, because we need to fit in with their plans as well. We get the team together and we talk to them about what we're going to try and achieve. And what we really should do is go back to the unit we're assessing and explain to them what we're doing. I do believe in marketing as a good audit tool, and I think it's important in this sort of thing that you take people with you. If people are on your side, they will contribute. We then get the information together. I shall speed up a bit because people are waving notes at me. So we need to say, how are we going to collect information? How are we going to document it? We're looking for the basis of objective evidence, which every auditor will know about. If you're not an auditor, you suffer from auditors. Then basically we have rules of what evidence. And that means it's got to be objective, it's got to be true, it's got to be documented. We can then validate it. We can go back and make sure that the information we have is accurate and complete. We need to have that assurance. Obviously, a lot of that we can do as we're collecting it. Then we can rate it. For each process, we say, is it achieved or not, and at what level, based on what we've already seen. Maintain traceability. That's to make sure we can always go back and find out where we got information. We need to make this proper evidence. And then we can record what we think and report it, which is why my little smiley face has now turned somewhat cross. Not everybody likes to get the sort of report that I often have to write. Ho, ho, ho. That's the fun side of being an auditor. We analyse it, we present it. We Cover key areas, but strengths and weaknesses. I do believe in reporting the good as well as the bad, so we must say, yes, you're strong here, but the whole thing's going to collapse. One thing we need to consider is what could go wrong. So starting out with the lowest consequence, if we're not actually optimizing at level 5, what's the impact on business? Maybe we can't change quick enough. Maybe when the business needs a major change in our process, we can't do it. Well, how often does that happen? So the impact is probably low. Going right down to performed process, if we fail at that level, on the bottom line there, maybe we're not actually producing what the business needs. That is a high consequence. That is serious. Yeah, we're not actually producing what the business wants. The business can suffer. Bringing in risk, of course, we look at probability. So, again, we can put this onto a chart and we can say, if we have a substantial gap in the performed process, bottom right-hand corner, it's a high risk. If we have a slight problem with the optimizing process, it's a low risk. Fairly obvious chart, the usual way we run. Top left is okay, bottom right is bad. Cobit 5, I said I'd mention it. That's the history of Cobit 5. The idea of it was to bring together Val IT and all the other elements of ISACA's products. I think the main difference with us and ITIL is ours is free. Ho ho. I can't afford ITIL. That's roughly what it looks like. All of this is available, all of this is available to you on the web, on the ISACA website, so I won't go through that again. We have a new domain of governance, but mainly we're just changing names. It's not a simple name change, though it is a lot more detailed. It is based on a lens concept because Cobit 5 framework at the top will drive you to documents, other documents we're producing like security, risk. Actually, it's now being produced because I'm on that committee as well, I think. So we're producing extra documents for detailed work. We have gone completely into the process model, left it the old maturity model completely. We won't be producing a separate model for Cobit 5 because Cobit 5 is the model itself. I won't go through that because it's already covered, and I've talked about all of this, but this is the Cobit 5 version of it. It's got a lot of benefits, which, again, you can read that as well as I can, so you can read that offline. But basically, those are all the advantages I've already discussed. Cobit 4.1 was a process model in itself. We've retained the principle because we've now got the process reference model, and that's what it looks like, which, as you see, we still have now a process description. Oh, come back, Derek. We have a process description, so that's what the process is trying to achieve. We have a purpose statement, that's the outcome. So this is Cobit 5, and it is in itself a process assessment model. That will just drive the whole concept of process assessment without having to produce a separate document. Again, free download. I think it's probably still there in draft form. There will be some assessor certification. It's something we promised in the past so that we will have a qualification for assessors in this. Basically, they've put forward a business case. This is the information I had as of a week ago. There is a business case put forward for it. There will be two types of assessor, a lead assessor and the person who does the work. Lead assessor will be obviously the person who certifies or otherwise. What's going to happen with it? Well, who knows? I think at the moment, we're talking probably not for 4.1. It will be developed with 5. Cobit 5, which I was hoping at the time I put this together would be January, but as of last Saturday, I had the latest information, and we're now expecting March delivery of the final product. So that's where we're going with assessing. Cobit 5 itself will be a process assessment model, will be much more useful for you in that sense. Certification will come, but probably not for Well, maybe next summer. And that is me. Muchas gracias. If that's the right pronunciation, my apologies if it's not. How about that? 45 slides in 40 minutes.